Have you ever just stopped and wondered, how did life on Earth get so wildly diverse? I mean, from the tiniest little bug to the biggest blue whale, where did all of this variety come from? For centuries, this was one of the biggest mysteries in science. Today, we're going to get into the story of how that mystery was cracked. Not by one, but by two huge ideas that completely changed how we look at the living world.
Okay, let's just jump right in with a question that sounds a little nuts but gets right to the heart of it all. Get this, a single oyster can lay over 100 million eggs. Now, if every single one of those survived and had their own babies and so on for just 5 generations, their total mass would be greater than the number of electrons in the known universe. So, why isn't everything just oysters? What's stopping them? This is the exact puzzle that evolution tries to solve.
And the first person to offer up a really solid, logical answer was, of course, the man himself, Charles Darwin. Before him, how species changed over time was basically a black box. Nobody knew the mechanism. Darwin, well, he gave us the key, and he called it natural selection.
Now, this wasn't some eureka moment. His theory was forged over years and years of careful observation. He spent 5 years traveling the world on the HMS Beagle, just looking at the staggering variety of life. Then, later, he reads a report by an economist, Thomas Malthus, about population and competition, and a light bulb goes off about the struggle for existence. He puts all these puzzle pieces together in his incredible book On the Origin of Species, and boom, biology was never the same again. So what was this game-changing idea? Well, at its core, Darwin's theory is really just a series of logical steps that connect to each other. It's less like a crazy complex formula and more like a simple recipe. A recipe that can generate incredible change over millions of years.
Let's just walk through that recipe. First, you've got rapid multiplication. Pretty much every living thing makes way more offspring than could ever survive. But that leads to a problem: limited resources. There's only so much food and space to go around. This, of course, creates a constant struggle for existence. And here's the secret ingredient: variation. No two individuals in a species are exactly the same. So in that struggle to live, some of those random little differences give an individual an edge. That's natural selection. The environment itself selects who wins. And finally, inheritance. Those winning traits get passed on, and over huge amounts of time, they add up and can eventually create whole new species. The classic example is the giraffe, right? Imagine an ancestor of the giraffe. When food on the ground got scarce, the ones that just happened to be born with slightly longer necks could reach leaves higher up in the trees. The shorter-necked ones couldn't, and they didn't make it. So over generations, that long-neck trait was selected for, passed on, and amplified, giving us the incredible animal we have today. It's a slow, gradual filtering process. Darwin's theory was beautiful. It was powerful. It explained so much. But there was a problem. A huge glaring hole in it, a massive blind spot that Darwin himself never, ever figured out. He saw that variation was the essential fuel that made natural selection work, but he had absolutely no idea where it came from. Why was one of those ancient giraffes born with a slightly longer neck than its sibling? Where did that difference originate? Darwin just didn't have an answer. And this was a major, major issue. He couldn't explain the origin of these critical differences. He also had trouble separating the traits that you could pass down from the ones you couldn't. He even took a shot at his own theory of inheritance. He called it pangenesis, but it turned out to be completely wrong. The how of variation was a total mystery. And this is where our story takes a really interesting turn. Enter a Dutch botanist named Hugo de Vries. Around the turn of the 20th century, he came along with a totally radical new idea. He suggested that maybe evolution wasn't always this slow, steady crawl. Maybe, sometimes, it takes a giant leap. De Vries gave us a new word and a new concept: mutation. He defined it as a sudden, spontaneous genetic change, something that could create a brand new feature in just a single generation. We're not talking tiny, gradual steps anymore. This was about sudden, significant change all at once. This just flipped the whole idea of the tempo of evolution on its head. Where Darwin saw a smooth, continuous process, de Vries argued it was jerky and unpredictable. He called it saltation. Basically, evolution by jumps. New forms could just appear out of nowhere. And you might be thinking, okay, evolution by jumps sounds a little out there. But here's the thing. This wasn't just some wild theory. There was actual evidence that these kinds of sudden changes were really happening. For instance, in 1891, a farmer found a lamb with super short legs had been born into his flock of normal sheep.
Just poof, there it was. This Ancon sheep was a new variety in a single step, and farmers actually loved it because, hey, it couldn't jump over fences.
And that wasn't a one-off thing either. A couple of years earlier, in 1889, hornless Hereford cattle were suddenly born to normal, horned parents. Again, these weren't gradual changes. They were big, dramatic new traits appearing in a single generation.
So now we've got these two ideas on the table. Darwin's slow, gradual selection and de Vries's sudden mutational leaps. And for a while, it seemed like you had to pick a side. It was Darwin versus de Vries. But as science progressed, we realized they weren't enemies at all. They were actually partners, two parts of the same, bigger story.
The differences are really stark when you put them side by side. For Darwin, the pace of change was slow and gradual. For de Vries, sudden and jerky. For Darwin, change came from tiny variations piling up. For de Vries, it was a single large-scale mutation. The main driver for Darwin was the struggle for survival, which made the process directional. For de Vries, it was a random mutation, making it totally unpredictable.
So what de Vries's theory gave us was absolutely critical. He showed us that mutations are the raw material, the very source of variation that Darwin was missing. He showed us they appear suddenly and randomly. But, and this is key, natural selection still has a job to do. It acts as the editor. Mutation creates the new possibilities, but natural selection decides which ones survive and which ones get cut.
And so in the end, the two theories fit together perfectly. Darwin gave us the why of evolution, why some traits stick around. That's natural selection. And de Vries gave us the how those new traits show up in the first place. That's mutation. One provided the engine of change, and the other provided the fuel. You really need both.
And you know, this whole story, the evolution of the theory of evolution itself, tells us something profound about how science works. It's not set in stone. It's a process of constant change, of asking better questions. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What accepted scientific fact of today is just waiting for its own mutation theory to come along and change everything we think we know?